House to Home, brought to you by RE/MAX Diamond Realty.
RE/MAX Diamond Realty Guam is in the house, everybody. Liz and Gina are here, and we are talking real estate as we do each and every week. Half a day, ladies.
Half a day. Thanks for having us.
Well, you're very welcome. And this week I wanted to talk about something that happens when you buy a new home. There's an inspection that has to happen. Most people, most astute home buyers will go through property with a fine-tooth comb. I would assume, a lot of people measure for the exact square footage. They check the power, the water, what have you, and everything like that. But there's an official inspection that also has to take place from specialists, as I understand.
Right. Well, in the purchase agreement, normally there's an inspection contingency, which allows the buyer to inspect the home. They can come back a couple of times, and we always recommend you bring an inspector with you. And the buyer has a choice of either doing it themselves. They could bring a friend, a family, an engineer. But then we say, here's a list of licensed inspectors that you would hire to do a thorough inspection of the property. Now, we don't give them one name. We just say, here's a list, you pick and choose. And basically it's for their protection so that later they can start asking the inspector all kinds of questions about different parts of the house. Now, an inspector normally, they charge about $400 to $500 to do an inspection. But they pretty much look at the plumbing, they look at the electrical outlets. Is it to code? Are there any deficiency within the home that is not to the government code, or a safety issue or a hazard? So those inspectors will point those out and prepare a report for the buyer, and then at that point the buyer will talk to the seller to say, hey, Mr. Seller, these are deficiencies. Are you willing to handle the problems? Are you willing to do appropriate repairs?
At the price we agreed on, or can I pay for those myself and you just knock the price down?
It's a matter of negotiation.
Negotiation, of course.
Or if they're buying it in an as-is condition, then that expense would be based on the buyer.
Well, Gina, what's remarkable to me hearing this is that a house might even be put in the market with some of these deficiencies already. If there's little tiny quirks in, say, the wiring or the plumbing.
Well, especially with and this applies to new homes as well, but especially with older homes, the seller puts it on the market and his mentality is, I'm selling a house that's already aged. In his mind, he probably realizes, yes, there's maintenance issues, but that's why it's priced the way it is, or maybe not. Some cases, it's not priced, it may not be priced where the buyer thinks it should be priced based on the maintenance issues, but there is that to consider. And the market dictates what happens in terms of pricing. Especially right now, the market has turned very quickly. Last year we were saying if you're going to buy, the market's picking up. Well, the market has picked up. And so now for buyers that, your question is about sellers, they put it on the market and there's obviously things that need to be done. Sometimes it's a matter of they can't afford to do it, so it's not going to get done. And I've taken that into account when I've priced my home. And for the buyers, the thing to remember is, for instance, maybe the plumbing is not quite right, or there's a little bit of an issue with electrical, or the paint job's not nice, or the cabinets are aged. But for the price of the home and the location you're looking at, can you find a suitable alternative in that good price range? Or is it easier to buy the house the way it is, negotiate with the seller accordingly, and you do the paint job? You change out the toilet bowl later. Because keep in mind, when the inspectors come, their job is to find everything wrong with the house. And then as a buyer, you need to decide, how important is that item to me? So that, is it more important that I buy the house, or is it more important that I get a house that has all of these things in perfect condition?
And the seller may be going through unreasonable circumstances, they're hey, I had a family member pass away, or I went through a divorce and everything like that. So I'm selling the house as quickly as possible.
That's right.
It's got some issues with the toilet and everything like that. I'll take $10,000 off if you fix it.
We've had homes where the report comes back and there's maybe 80 items on that list.
Yeah. Wow.
Yes, and because the inspectors are pretty thorough. Now, we've had buyers that will look at it and would say, hey, that's important, but I can fix that. That's not a problem. So they'll go through the list and then decide what is important to them. And they may turn around and say, Mr. Seller, I can handle 20 of the items, but I require that you take care of 10 of them. So then at that point, we can talk to both buyer and seller and say, okay, how do we work this? Can we meet somewhere in the middle so that both parties walk away, happy?
Like, I'll replace the shower heads in the
Yes.
bathroom, but the issues with the water heater,
That's right.
that's on you.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think the key element there is that the house meets certain codes for the government, because if it doesn't and you can't occupy it, then your loan is in jeopardy. The banks won't loan unless it is habitable.
Well, now, real quick, Gina, Liz was saying earlier that, as a prospective buyer, you can go back to the house a couple times, maybe even 3. For people that are planning on doing this, you want to get the most bang for your buck, metaphorically. What should you be planning to do each time when you visit? Should you spend one time just to look at wiring, or one time?
So in a hot market, you may only get one opportunity to look at it before you have to decide.
And who dictates that? How many chances
Well,
you get?
The market does.
Oh, if it sells. Okay.
Like if I schedule an appointment to go take a look at a house today, and I go, and then I decide, I might want to come back over the weekend to see what the neighborhood's like, to take a look at the house again during a different time of day. By the time I get there, what if there's already a contract on the table?
The house gets snapped up.
So yeah, you can go look at it 3, 4, 5 times, but if it's gone, all you're doing is looking at the house, because
Then you get
the
that beautiful
opportunity.
sign
That's
The
right.
that says
opportunity's
sold
gone.
by
Yeah.
Liz Duenas.
But
Remember, the market changes.
So as an agent, if we know it's a hot market and we know the price is right, we would say, hey, you don't want to waste too much time. If you really like it, you can put contingencies in the contract subject to A, B, C, D. And then at that point, you can bow out of the transaction if the contingencies are not satisfied. But as Gina puts it, you're right. If it's a hot market, it'll be snapped up fairly quickly.
If you do sign a contract and you become the buyer who negotiated with the seller successfully, and you're pending on that property, remember, you have so many days in your contract to go and inspect the contingencies. You can go back as many times as you desire, based on availability, of course, if there's somebody living in there based on schedule. But you can go back 4, 5, 10 times. It's up to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, ladies, thank you for the information. It's interesting how the cliche is known as window shopping, but certainly that may not be the case. So make sure that you maximize your time and the information that they gave you. All right, we're back after this.